Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to see you here tonight. This is our last virtual program via the wonderful Thunder River Theater. And we've got a great way to take it out. It's very strong writing by the Moroccan author whose name is Tahar Ben Jelloun. He has written some beautiful, beautiful words. One, who will be read by my friend Abid Hassan, is called By Fire, and it is an account of the actual incident that sparked the Arab Spring uprising in 2011. Mohammed Bouazizi in Tunisia is the man that this story is about. This is a fictionalized sort of account of the actual incident. And from Tunisia, that spark went from Egypt to Bahrain to Libya to Syria to Morocco to Yemen and all throughout the Arab world. Straining against authoritarianism and corruption and poverty and hoping for democracy, free elections, economic freedom, human rights, and employment, the things that we all take for granted where we are. And after that, my friend Saeed Harbal was going to be reading, but he was going to see his mother in Morocco. So I will read the preface to the English translation of a little book that he wrote in 2002, there we go, called Islam Explained, that he kind of wrote to help his daughter understand things. And for other people, I would highly recommend it to anybody. Extremely readable and extremely loving and compassionate. So we've got two beautiful pieces. Abid, I'm so glad you're here. And I'm so glad that you would lend your talents to this wonderful reading. And with that, I would welcome you all to listen to By Fire by Tahar Ben Jelloun.
By Fire by Tahar Ben Jelloun. Returning home from the cemetery where he had just buried his father, Muhammad felt as though the burden he carried had become heavier. He was bent, aged. He walked slowly. He had just turned 30. He'd never celebrated his birthday. The years went by, they were all alike. Poverty, deprivation, and a vague resignation imbued his life with sadness that had over time come to seem natural. Like his father, he never complained. He was not a fatalist or even religious. But his father's death had turned his life upside down. He was the eldest and was thus responsible now for the family. 3 brothers and 2 sisters. A diabetic mother, not yet invalid. Muhammad's latest job hunt, like many before, had yielded nothing, and now he was nervous. It wasn't a question of being lucky or unlucky. It was more, he said, a problem of injustice linked to the misfortune of being born poor. He was not going to sit in front of the finance ministry headquarters to protest unemployment anymore. Some formerly unemployed graduates had found work, but he wasn't one of them. His degree in history interested no one. He could have taught, but the Ministry of Education wasn't hiring. He dug out his old school bag, hidden in the linen closet, emptied it of all of its papers and documents, including his diploma, made a small pile in the sink, and burned them. He watched the flames consume the words, and by chance they burned everything but his name and his date of birth. With a piece of wood, he rekindled the fire until all had turned to ash. His mother, alerted by the smell, rushed in. "You've gone crazy! How will burning your diploma help anything? Now how are you going to apply for a teaching position? 3 years gone up in smoke!" Without a word, he collected the ashes, threw them into the trash, cleaned the sink, and washed his hands. He was calm. He had no desire to speak about or justify his action. What was the use of hanging on to a piece of paper that wasn't going to get him anywhere? His face remained inscrutable. His mother reminded him to pick up her medicine. The pharmacist would give it to him on credit, she said. Later, he sat on a bench and stared at a trail of ants on the ground. He asked a boy who sold loose cigarettes for one, lit it, and smoked slowly. The ants had deposited their loads and now headed back to where they had come from. His mind was made up. He would take over his father's cart. It was in bad shape. He would have to repair the wheels, replace a rotten plank, have a scale recalibrated, get in touch with Bouchabe, the fruit and vegetable supplier. Where would he find the money? His mother had sold all her jewelry when his father got sick. She had nothing left. Muhammad had heard about microcredit. He looked into it and was given a thick stack of forms to fill out. He was quickly discouraged by all the paperwork. He began to regret having burned his diploma. Muhammad had won a trip to Mecca in a raffle at the Faculty of Arts and Letters where he had studied. The one time he'd got lucky, he couldn't take advantage of it. What was he going to do with a plane ticket? He had no desire to go on a pilgrimage to Mecca, and anyway, he didn't have the money to carry out the ritual. He wanted the airline to refund the cost of the ticket to him, but it refused. The only thing he could do was sell it to a pilgrim. He managed to get a third of the price, but still had to bribe the travel agent to change the name on the ticket. With the meager amount he had left, he repaired the cart and finally began to sell oranges and apples. Muhammad knew that Bushabe was a crass and dishonest man. His father often told him this. The man immediately claimed that Muhammad's father owed him money and hadn't paid his last two bills. Muhammad had no way of verifying this. He had come to terms with the guy because Bushabe was the only one who sold on credit, charging a markup of 10 to 15%. Muhammad didn't argue and gave him a deposit for 2 crates of oranges and one of apples. He also asked for a few baskets of strawberries. Bushabe took him aside and, in a hushed voice, asked after his younger sister. Muhammad answered that she was doing well and she was getting ready for her college entrance exam. You know, your father promised her to me, Bushabe said. I want to get married, have a family. You and I could even become partners. You can't make ends meet with the fruit cart. There's a lot of competition, and also, to get the right spot, you have to be on good terms with the police. Muhammad looked at him, bowed his head, and left without saying anything. He didn't really know where to set up his cart. Some vendors moved around, others found themselves strategic spots, usually near an intersection or at a traffic circle. He soon saw that the best places were taken and decided to keep moving. He loudly hawked his oranges and apples, but nobody could hear him over the honking horns. When Muhammad stopped for a moment next to a grocer's stand, the owner instantly chased him off, shouting, Are you crazy? What's wrong with you? I bought my license and I pay taxes. How am I going to make a living if you plant yourself right in front of me? Go on, get lost. On his first day, Muhammad just wandered around from one street to another. Even so, he managed to sell more than half his produce. He realized that he would need to wake up very early the next day if he wanted to get a good spot before all the others arrived. At dinner that night, he looked at his younger sister and imagined her in Bushabe's arms. He felt ashamed. A young and innocent girl in the hands of such a brute? Never. After dinner, he told his mother that Bushabe had demanded money from him. Your father couldn't stand having debts, she said. He paid them off as soon as he could. Bushabe is a crook. He has no proof. Just forget about it. Did you remember to get my medicine? I only have one pill left. Muhammad took out a box full of books and laid them out in front of the house for sale. History books, paperback novels, and a leather-bound copy of Moby Dick in English, a prize that he had won for coming first in his English class in his senior year of high school. He sold 3 books, making just enough to buy the medicine. Nobody wanted Moby Dick, so he kept it. That night he reread a few pages and realized that his English was a little rusty. Before falling asleep, he thought about beautiful Zainab. He had loved her for 2 years, but with no money, no work, and no home of his own, it was impossible to get married. He was unhappy. What could he promise her when he had nothing to offer? But for now, he had more pressing priorities, and he felt that he would succeed if he tackled things one at a time. Zainab would wait for him. Zainab worked as a secretary at a doctor's office. She really loved Muhammad. She was an only daughter. She had suggested that they get married and live at her parents' place. But Muhammad was proud. It was unthinkable to him to depend on his wife and live with his in-laws. Usually, he and Zainab met at a cafe. They talked a lot, kidded around, and often burst into laughter. More than 3 months had passed since they'd been able to make love. The last time, Zainab's cousin had lent them her small apartment while her roommate was traveling. Someday, Zainab said, we will reach the end of this tunnel. I promise you. I know it. I can feel it. You'll have a good job. I'll stop working for this sleazy doctor, and we'll start our life. You'll see. Yes, someday, but I'll never get on one of those flimsy boats and become an illegal. I know your plan. Canada. Yes, we'll all go to Canada and we'll all go to paradise. It's written somewhere, but in the meantime, I have to feed my big family, take care of my mother, and fight to get a good spot for my cart. Zainab took his hands and kissed them. He took hers and did the same. Muhammad woke up at 6. He tried to make as little noise as possible so as not to wake his brothers with whom he shared a room. There was Nabil, 20 years old, an unlicensed tour guide who often had problems with the police. There was Nuruddin, 18, a high school student who worked in a bakery from Friday evening until Monday morning. And then there was Yassine, 15, intelligent, lazy, handsome, and spiritual. He promised his mother that he would become a millionaire and take her to visit the pyramids. Muhammad washed himself, swallowed a piece of bread, and took out his cart. At the corner of a narrow street, a police officer stopped him. This is your old man's cart. Where is he? He's dead. And you're just taking over, as if nothing had happened? What's the problem? Is it forbidden to make an honest living? Don't be insolent. Your papers. Muhammad gave the man all the papers he had on him. No insurance. Can you imagine? If you ran over a kid, who would pay? You? Since when is it necessary to have insurance for a fruit cart? This is new. The policeman took out a notebook and started writing something while watching Muhammad out of the corner of his eye. After a moment, he said, You're playing the fool, pretending you don't understand. I'm not doing anything. You're the one who's doing everything you can to keep me from working. Okay, you can go now, but think about the insurance. I'm telling you this for your own good. Then, with both hands, the policeman helped himself to oranges and apples. He bit into an apple and said with his mouth full, Move on now. Mohammed found a good spot. It was still quite early. He put down the cart and waited. A car stopped. The driver lowered his window and ordered 1 kilo of each, and give me the good ones. The next customers were in less of a hurry. They got out of their cars, felt the fruits, asked for the price, bargained, and bought a few oranges. An hour later, another vendor arrived with a decorated cart and a better, more attractive selection, including some expensive and rare exotic fruits. He had his regular customers. With a look and a slight nod of his head, the man indicated that Muhammad should leave this spot. He obeyed without protesting. Once again, he had to wander the streets. He'd had a good morning all the same and decided to have more variety next time. By the end of the day, he had sold everything. He went back to Bushabe to refill his cart. That evening, although he was tired, he went to see Zena at her parents' place. They liked him. He told Zena about his day and ate some crepes with her before heading home. In the meantime, a plain-clothes policeman visited Muhammad's mother. He asked her about Muhammad and wanted to know why he didn't see the unemployed graduate group anymore. The poor woman answered as well as she could, with hesitation and apprehension. The policeman handed her a summons, according to which her son was to report to the police department that evening. She started to cry, knowing that the police never brought good news. She thought it best to tell the officer, My son is not political. He left without replying. When she gave Muhammad the summons, he looked at it and then stuffed it into his pocket. I'll go in for a little while. They're going to interrogate me. If I don't go, they'll come for me, which will be even worse. Son, this visit has raised my blood sugar. I can tell my mouth is dry. I don't feel well. These people are paid to create problems for us. In all likelihood, that cop comes from a family as poor as ours. But as you know, The poor don't like one another. At the police department, Muhammad waited on a bench for a long time. Now and then he got up and tried to find out why he had been called in. No one knew. He suspected that the summons was intended to simply intimidate him. He had received a similar summons when he first joined the unemployed graduates' demonstrations. Beside him sat an old man who was clearly impoverished. He didn't say a word and seemed about to fall asleep. What could one hold against this man who was coughing and spitting? He would have been better off in a hospital room. Muhammad moved away from him. He was afraid of catching tuberculosis. There was also a woman in a jalaba. She smoked cigarette after cigarette and railed against life. I was happy in my village. My God, why did I ever marry that imbecile who has now abandoned me? She called Muhammad to witness. I'm a prostitute. I'm not ashamed to say it. But someday all this will change. You'll see. I know this. It can't go on. Around midnight, a man signaled for Muhammad to follow him. Identity verification. Classic interrogation. Police officer found it intriguing that Muhammad was no longer in touch with his former fellow activists. He asked if the Islamists had approached him. No, it was my father's death that changed everything. I took over his cart, our only means of survival. Yes, I know. And how's it going? I've barely got started. You know, there are no miracles. There are those who manage and make quite a bit of money, and there are others, the chumps, the losers. It's up to you to choose. It took Muhammad some time to understand the deal that the police officer was offering him. Become an informer and have a profitable spot, or refuse and say goodbye to his business. Think about it hard. Tomorrow I'll meet you at Independence Traffic Circle. Now go home. Muhammad knew that if he showed up the next day at the appointed place, he would have to accept the cop's proposition. Early in the morning, he took his cart and headed toward a working-class neighborhood far from the famous traffic circle. His mother's diabetes was out of control. She needed to go back to the doctor and get a new prescription. He made some calculations. Not enough money to meet this unexpected expense. He decided to take her to the public hospital. His 17-year-old sister went too. Muhammad left them at the entrance and started to sell his produce. He realized that this was an excellent spot. People visiting the hospital bought fruit for all the patients. An hour later, two police officers, one of them a woman, appeared before him. Your papers. He gave them his papers. This is not your neighborhood. What are you doing here? I brought my mother to the hospital. She has high blood sugar. Bless you. It's good that you brought her here, but you'll be even more blessed if you clear out. We won't make you pay a fine this time, but you've been warned. Don't come here again. Is that clear? But this is how I earn my living. God's earth is vast. Muhammad would have liked to answer that God clearly didn't like the poor, and that the earth was only vast for those with means. But he told himself, it's not worth it. It'll just make things worse. They could even arrest me for atheism. He was perhaps not an atheist, but since the Islamists were almost everywhere, now he had distanced himself from the religion. His father used to say to him, the believer is destined for sorrow. God tests him. So be patient, my son. Just as Muhammad was about to leave, a car stopped in front of him. The driver, who seemed to be in a rush, asked him to weigh all of his fruit and put it in a big basket which he was holding out. I want to buy it all. Today is a day of celebration. My son just graduated from high school. Can you believe it? I'm going to send him to study in America. Yes, sir, to America, because here you can study day and night, and then there's no work. But when you have an American degree, they hire you right away. I am happy. He's my only son. My daughters don't count. I can't get them married. Nobody wants them. Well, hurry up. Quick, quick. How much is it? Calculate quickly. If you want, I can help you. He took out his cell phone and started calculating as Muhammad dictated the numbers. Well, it comes to 253 rials. The man handed him 300 rial bills. You deserve it. You are a good guy. It shows. Muhammad started pushing his cart towards the wholesale market. He wasn't going to go to Boucher anymore. He would pay cash. At the end of the afternoon, he put his card away and went to wait for Zainab at the entrance to her office. Nearby were a large number of busy young people. He was stunned by how many ways these people had thought of to make a living. There were people speed washing cars, helping the elderly, making toys out of soda cans, or selling loose American cigarettes, hand drawn postcards, maps, or photographs of Michael Jackson and Ben Harper. There were acrobats dressed in red performing tricks. There were monkey trainers, parrot trainers, vendors of pirated DVDs with films of all tastes: Indian, the latest American, classic films, Egyptian, and French. There were also storytellers with microphones pinned to their jackets. Only snake charmers, fortune tellers, sorcerers, and other swindlers were missing. Then, suddenly, there was a panic. The street vendors all began running. Security agents were chasing them. Violently, the police managed to catch two people, a parrot man and a DVD seller. Blows, insults. The parrot was screaming. The DVD lay smashed on the ground. Among them was the movie Spartacus, starring Kirk Douglas. All that remained of the movie was its sleeve. The two vendors were thrown into a national security van. Mohammed felt like screaming, but he thought about his mother, about his entire family. He swallowed his anger and told himself, I have to see Zainab. He was glad to see her. I told her about his day. He told her about his day and avoided talking at first about the police attack on the street vendors. He suggested that they have some fish in a popular restaurant by the harbor. Soon the two of them were laughing like children in a splendid meadow on a spring day. He said to her, the police defeated Spartacus. He was crushed under the tires of the van. They returned home on foot. On the way, they saw some street kids making a fire to warm themselves. One of them asked for a cigarette. I don't smoke, Muhammad said, but take this and buy something to eat. The police vans drove slowly alongside them. Prostitutes were being asked for their papers. Zainab noticed that one of the girls was slipping a banknote into the cop's pocket. It was routine. That was how things went. They discussed their marriage again. We have to wait. I just started working. I've got to pull off something big first. What do you mean? Don't worry, I'm not going to rob anyone, but I'd really like to open a store at the market. One of our neighbors is sick, and he owns a well-positioned store in the central market. It'd be great if he let me take over. I could pay for it little by little. I've looked into it. His children don't want to continue the business. They're engineers and technicians, so they don't have job problems. This would be an ideal solution for me. My mother is going to speak to the man. You're right, Zainab said, but I'm tired of waiting. We need to have our own place, even if it's just a shack, a hole in the wall, a shed. At home, the old TV was showing a program celebrating the president's 30-year reign over the republic. The president appeared with his wife, who had gained a lot of weight. Both wore makeup, were well dressed, too tidy, with not a hair out of place and a smug, satisfied smile. The camera followed them through their palace, through their immaculate gardens with perfectly manicured trees and automatic sprinklers to water the lawns. The president's wife was saying, my husband works so hard that I have to force him to rest a little. Thank God the country is doing well. The people are grateful. They show us their support every day because they realize the country is prosperous and is moving forward. The president made a gesture with his hand, as though waving to a child. These images were accompanied by some syrupy background music, which got on Muhammad's nerves. His mother was dozing. His brothers and sisters were getting ready for bed. Yassine showed Muhammad his report card. For every class, it said more or less the same thing. Intelligent boy, talented, but lazy. Could do better. Yassine laughed and said, I get bored in class. And in any case, what's the point of studying? You've seen it yourself. You studied like crazy and then no job. Now you've taken up dad's cart. Muhammad tried to give his brother some hope, but it was difficult. There were too much injustice in the country, too much inequality and humiliation. Yassine told him that while returning home from school, he had seen a man being beaten by the police. The man was screaming, and people stopped, but no one intervened. I recognized the guy. He was the caretaker of that glass building. The one on the other side of the neighborhood? The guy was fired, but nobody knows why. Today, he stole a chicken. It was bizarre. The man was screaming, and so was the chicken, because he wouldn't let go of it. Early the next morning, Muhammad left to buy his fruit. He bought a larger variety this time. Coming out of the market, he met a former fellow activist who had got a job at the town hall. I don't do anything there. I'm in an office with four other clerks, he said. Some of them have files to work on, but I don't. I'm bored. Plus, I haven't been paid yet. It's been 6 months. I live on credit. I think they hired some of the university graduates just to make us shut up, when in fact they don't have any positions for us. And how about you? As you can see. They said goodbye and parted. 10 minutes later, as Muhammad was waiting at a red light, two policemen in plain clothes pulled him aside. What were you and your friend talking about? Nothing. The first slap took Muhammad by surprise. He yelled and got a punch in his stomach. Shut the fuck up. Come on, what's your friend's name? I forgot his name. Another slap. Some passerby stopped. One of the cops threatened them. Clear off. He's a thief. We're doing this to protect you. Let us do our job. Muhammad cried, It's not true. I'm not a thief. Seeing the crowd close in on them, the cops knocked over the cart and left Muhammad with all his fruit on the ground. The crowd comforted him. They helped him pick up the fruit, and though most of the strawberries were crushed. Some of the people said, This is disgusting. How shameful. Attacking a poor street vendor? They behave as if they were in the mafia movies. These bastards all want their share. This can't go on. One day or another, God will bring truth to light. God's on the side of the rich. Arguments followed. Villain, infidel, God is with everyone. God is everywhere. The people decided to buy Muhammad's fruit out of solidarity. He gave away the strawberries that weren't crushed. He didn't feel like working anymore. He felt sick. He went home, put away the cart, and decided to take advantage of his brother's absence to sleep and recuperate a bit. He had a dream. His father, dressed in all white, was beckoning to Muhammad to join him. He was saying something, but Muhammad couldn't hear him. He had no desire to join the deceased. Suddenly, his mother appeared and said, Don't listen to what he's asking you to do. He is with God, perhaps in heaven. Muhammad woke, disturbed. The dream had been so powerfully real. It was high time that Muhammad and Zainab had cell phones. They bought two used phones in the central market. The phones were simple, no monthly fee, just a rechargeable SIM card, which allowed them to receive calls even when the credit was used up. Muhammad also decided to improve his fruit cart. On one side, he set up a manual juice press. On the other side, he arranged the different fruits in a more appealing way. He also attached a board to show the prices, and to make it look pretty, he hung a picture of the singer Kulthum. He even bought a fly swatter. Muhammad seemed destined to be a wandering street vendor, since those who collaborated with the police took all the good spots. But one morning, he decided to return to the area by the hospital, where business was good. Soon, two police officers arrived and started circling him. Kulthum? You like her voice? We do too. But why have you hung a picture of an old singer who died a long time ago, and not one of our beloved president? May God grant him long life and prosperity. I hadn't thought about it. If you want, I can remove the singer's picture. No, keep it. But hang a nice picture of our dear president above it, and one that's bigger than Kulthum's, okay? Okay. The officers left. Muhammad was covered in a cold sweat. He'd had enough of this almost daily harassment. He called Zainab and told her about the incident. They want you to give in. These people are rotten, corrupt to the bone. I admire you for standing up to them. Do I have a choice? So, shall we see each other this evening? Yes, see you tonight. He found an old newspaper with a full-page picture of the president and tried to hang it on his cart, but the page kept falling. So he folded it up and put it under one of his crates. He would bring it out if they asked him again for a picture of the president. While Muhammad waited for customers on a busy street, a newspaper vendor stopped and handed him an Arabic newspaper. On the front page was written, "Scandal. An MP from the majority party extorted money from unemployed graduates by making them fill out forms to emigrate to Canada. 500 riyals per file. 252 victims. He has not been charged." Muhammad knew about this swindle and would have been a victim of it if he ever managed to save the required file fee. The newspaper vendor said to him, "You see, we can write about everything, denounce everything, but it doesn't change anything. That bastard is still an MP. He raked in a huge amount of money, and the authorities didn't take any action against him. You know, it wouldn't surprise me if one day one of those victims slit his throat. After all, you can always take justice into your own hands." A sudden commotion. Muhammad guessed that the police were making a roundup. He quickly pushed his cart into a narrow alleyway to hide. Some cats were fighting by an overturned trash can. Children played with plastic guns. He took a deep breath, crouched down, and held his head in his hands. He felt like throwing everything away and being done for good. But then he thought of his mother, saw Zainab's face, his brothers, his sisters. He got up and headed back towards the main street. Muhammad had been working for more than a month, despite the countless obstacles he encountered. One morning, however, he had a bad feeling. As he was getting his cart out, one of the wheels fell off. He didn't know whether this was an accident or a result of sabotage. He'd had problems with some of his neighbors who disapproved of his criticizing of the regime. One day, the husband next door said, "If you continue speaking out against the government, you're going to bring trouble on all of us. Why do you have to run everything down? You want everyone to be rich? You're a communist, aren't you? You better calm yourself, because in this country, when the police arrest people, you never know what shape they'll be in when they return." "See? You, too, are criticizing the government." "No, I'm only stating facts. I'm happy. Life is good." Then he started shouting at the top of his lungs, "Long live the president! Long live the first lady!" Muhammad began repairing the wheel. Children stood around him, wanting to help. The cart was soon on its feet, and he left. At the first intersection, a policeman stopped him. "Where are you off to like this?" "I'm going to work." "Your work permit?" "You know very well that it doesn't exist." "Yes, I know, but it can exist in other forms." Muhammad pretended not to understand. The police officer said, "Too bad for you. That response may cost you a lot more. See you later." Muhammad left without turning around. He ran into a funeral procession. There were a lot of people, and strangely, some of them were carrying the national flag. Muhammad asked who was being buried. "A poor guy, like you and me. No one knows exactly how he died. He was arrested last week for something to do with the internet, and then yesterday his parents found his body dumped in front of the door." "Killed by the police?" "Clearly, but there's no proof," the man said in a low voice. "He was a great guy. He worked in a cafe, and in the evening he played on the internet." Muhammad followed the procession while pushing his cart. He noticed that plainclothes policemen were taking pictures. After the burial, he left for the wholesale market. It was violent. He didn't even have time to get up. Two uniformed police officers, a man and a woman, threw him to the ground and seized the cart. "Confiscated! You have no right to sell illegally. You have no work permit, no license. You don't pay taxes. You're stealing from the state. So it's over. Your cart is confiscated." The female officer said, "Now get lost. You'll get a summons to appear in court. Get the hell out of here." Muhammad remained on the ground because the other officer was still kicking him. Passerby stopped to watch. Some of them protested. The police threatened them. A jeep arrived and an officer got out. After the police had explained the situation, he got back into the jeep and disappeared. Then a police van arrived. Other cops got out and gathered the fruit that had fallen off the cart. One of them even bit into an apple he'd picked up. Muhammad, powerless, said nothing. He wandered through the streets, stunned by what had just happened and incapable of thought. Without his realizing it, his steps carried him to the town hall. He asked to speak to the mayor. A man at the front desk made quick circles at his temple with his index finger to indicate that Muhammad was crazy. You think you can just see the mayor like that? Why not? I need to speak to him. Who do you think you are? Are you rich? Are you important? Now get out of here and let me drink my tea in peace. Muhammad insisted. Perhaps the deputy mayor? They're all out. The governor is opening a new mosque. And tomorrow, let me give you some advice. Drop it. All right. But before I go, I have to tell you why I want to speak to the mayor. Why? The police confiscated the one thing I need to make a living, the cart I used to sell my fruit. It's my livelihood. And you think the mayor will overrule the police for the sake of your beautiful eyes? For the sake of justice. Well, aren't you special? Where did you come from? Lowering his voice a little, the man asked, where have you seen justice done in this country? Then he stepped out for a moment and returned armed with a club. Now get lost, or I'll break your pretty face. Muhammad didn't insist any more. That evening he saw Zainab, who suggested that she go with him to town hall. Also, she had another idea. What if we went directly to the chief of police? Why not? They went to the police headquarters. None of the officers there knew about Muhammad's situation. Zainab spoke first. Well, in that case, we're going to press charges for theft. You're going to file a charge against the police? Where do you think we are? Sweden? The officer asked with a wicked smile. We just want our cart back. I understand. Give me your ID card so that I can make photocopies, and I'll contact you if I have any news. Zainab didn't trust him, so she refused, pulled Muhammad by the arm, and they left. They walked through the streets for a long time, holding each other's hands or with their arms around each other's waist. A car pulled up beside them. Plain-clothed police officers. Your papers? But you're not married. It's illegal to walk in deserted streets at this time of night. Zainab used her charm and begged the officer not to report them. My father's very violent. Please let us go. We'll go home. We weren't doing anything wrong. Okay, get going. You're off the hook this time. They both went straight home. Muhammad had a very restless night. He hadn't told his mother what happened. Stress made her blood sugar rise, and his father had said. That's what his father said. Early the next morning, Muhammad washed himself. Then, for the first time since his father's death, he decided to pray. He changed into clothes that were all white. His mother, asleep, without waking her, kissed her on the forehead. He glanced at his sleeping brothers and sisters. Then he ran out of the house. He borrowed his brother's old motorbike, stopped at a gas station, and filled a plastic water bottle with gasoline. He put the bottle in a small bag and headed toward the town hall. There, he asked to see an official. No one wanted to see him. He returned to the place where the police had confiscated his cart. They were there again, and the cart was nearby, empty. Muhammad went up to them and asked for his property back. The male cop slapped him hard and shouted, Look, you filthy rat, get lost before I beat the shit out of you. Muhammad tried to defend himself. This time the female officer took her turn slapping him and spitting in his face. You creep! You're spoiling our breakfast! You have no manners. You're a nobody. Muhammad lay prostrate. He didn't move, didn't speak. His face was immobile. His eyes were red, his jaw clenched. Something inside him was about to explode. He stayed in this position for 2 or 3 minutes. To him, it felt like an eternity. The male officer said, Go on, get out of here. Your cart? You'll never see it again. It's all over. You've shown us no respect, and for this, you pay a price in our beloved country. Muhammad's mouth was dry, his saliva bitter. It was hard for him to breathe. If I had a gun, I would empty it into these bastards, he thought. I don't have a gun, but I still have my body, my life, my wasted life. This is my weapon. Muhammad got to his feet and backed away from them. He started up the motorbike and headed to the town hall. He locked the bike to a pole and again asked to speak to the mayor or one of his deputies. The man at the front desk was even angrier than he'd been the day before. Back outside, Muhammad thought about the bottle of gasoline in the small bag, adjusted his white clothes, and walked around the square. No one noticed him. It was a sunny December morning, December 17th. A confused jumble of images rushed through his mind. His mother in a bed, his father in a coffin, himself at the Faculty of Arts and Letters, Zainab smiling, Zainab angry, Zainab begging him not to do anything, his mother getting out of bed and calling for him, the face of the woman who'd slapped him earlier, who slapped him again, his body bent over as though he were offering himself to an executioner, the blue sky, a huge tree sheltering him, himself in Zainab's arms under the tree, himself as a child, running so as not to be late for school, his French teacher praising him, himself taking his college exams, showing his diploma to his parents, his diploma pinned to a sign beside the word unemployed, his diploma burning in the sink, his father's burial again. Screams, birds, the president and his wife wearing huge black sunglasses, the woman who slapped him, the other who insulted him, a procession of sparrows crossing the sky, Spartacus, a public fountain, his mother and his two sisters standing in line to get water, the cops brutalizing him again, insults, blows, insults, blows. One last time, Muhammad asked to see the mayor. Refusals and insults. The man at the front desk pushed him with his club, and he fell to the ground. Muhammad rose in silence and went to stand in front of the town hall's main entrance. He took the bottle of gasoline from the bag, poured it all over himself from head to toe until the bottle was empty. Then he lit his Bic lighter, looked for a moment into its flame, and drew it towards his clothes. The fire ignited immediately. Within moments, the crowd ran toward him. The front desk man screamed. He tried to put out the fire with his jacket, but Muhammad had transformed into a torch. By the time the ambulance had arrived, the fire was out, but Muhammad had lost all human resemblance. He was entirely black, like a grilled lamb. The front desk man was crying. "It's all my fault. I should have helped him." Muhammad is in the hospital. His entire body is wrapped in bandages, like a shroud. He is in a coma, a commotion in the hallways. Doctors in white coats and nurses race down the hallway that leads to Muhammad's room. The president has come. The president has inquired about Muhammad's fate. The president is not happy. He hears about the mayor who refused to see Muhammad. He orders him fired. The president is angry. He finds out that the international press is covering the story. A horde of doctors follow the president into the hospital room. Obscene and ridiculous displays. The entire country is in revolt. With her hair tied back, Zainab leads a demonstration, her fist raised. She is shouting and screaming. Muhammad dies on January 4th, 2011. There are demonstrations everywhere, cries of, "We are all Muhammads." The president leaves the country like a thief. His plane disappears into the starry night. More demonstrations. Photographs of Muhammad are everywhere, victim and symbol. The international media rush to the country to interview his family. Even a film producer comes to see them. He hands an envelope to the tearful mother and says, "Please accept this help. It's not much. Such is fate, cruel and unjust." He bends down and whispers into the weeping woman's ear, "It's important that you don't speak to anyone else. Don't give any interviews to journalists. I am going to help you. I will tell Muhammad's story. The entire world should know what happened. Muhammad is a hero, a victim, and a martyr. Do we agree? You will not speak with anyone but me. I have to go now, but if you need anything at all, here's my card, and here's a cell phone so you can call me." The mother didn't understand anything this person said, but her daughters understood very well. This guy wants to buy our brother's death and profit from it. What a nightmare. What an utter nightmare. Muhammad's story doesn't belong to anyone. It's a story of a simple man, like millions of others who, after being crushed, humiliated, and denied in life, became the spark that set the world ablaze. No one can ever steal his death. The end.
That's a very powerfully phrased account of a true story that did spark the Arab Spring there in 2011. And very beautifully read and very beautifully written. And the translation from the French is also awfully nice. And this same author, Tahar Ben Jelloun, after another episode in the world, in 2002, wrote Islam Explained, partially to explain to his own children about the events of 2001 in New York City. And I'd like to just read you the preface to the American edition of this small book and encourage you to read it. I had not known about it before, but it's a lovely, lovely explanation that a lot of us could benefit from. Here we go. Despite its growth in the world, Islam is still misunderstood and often grasped only as a caricature. For most of the European and American public, the image of Islam is negative. These past few years, people have been talking about it only in connection with dramatic occurrences and catastrophes, assassinations, terrorist attacks, as if this religion engendered only conflicts whose backdrop is one of the fanaticism and intolerance. Most Americans first became aware of Islam either through the emblematic figure of Malcolm X or through the seizure of American soldiers as hostages in Iran. Indeed, it was with Khomeini's Iranian Revolution in 1979 that Islam erupted in the world media as a political force. This religion, which in Arabic means submission to peace, seemed to be a violent tornado that has promoted war rather than peace. Since then, the mixture into Islam of the various elements of revolution, obscurantism, terrorism, and opposition to the West have increased and ended up constructing a hateful image of this religion and hence its followers. Certainly, a few days after September 11th, the President of the United States made some gestures of reconciliation with the American Islamic community. He asked people not to confuse Islam with terrorism, but there were acts of aggression against Arabs and Muslims in September and even against some Indians believed to belong to the Muslim religion. In this kind of situation, symbolic gestures are inadequate. It is for this reason that this book may prove valuable. It does not foster confusion, nor does it add further fuel to the conflicts. Quite the reverse. It explains and informs in the hope that this religion may no longer be diverted from its true path for political ends. Purposes that foster the love of death more than the love of life and respect of others. The men who attacked America on September 11th, 2001 were in effect attacking Islam itself as a religion, a culture, and a civilization. They disfigured and betrayed it, for nowhere in the Islamic texts does it say that you must commit suicide while killing as many people as possible. In Islam, suicide is prohibited and punished in the beyond. Those who organized and planned these dreadful attacks have first and above all dealt a very serious blow to Islam and the world's Muslims. It has made them accomplices in a tragedy that nothing could justify. This was how it was experienced by the Muslim people, notably in several Arab countries. At the start, it's true, there were few individuals who expressed their joy at the news of these slaughters. But these fools represented a minority that were ignorant of the gravity of such an event and confused the legitimate criticisms that could be made of American foreign policy, especially in the Near East, with divine revenge, a revenge that killed innocent people. Why this short book is written just now? For a simple reason. I have heard my own children repeat some insane remarks about Islam. I told myself that if Islam is misunderstood even in my own family, and if I, who am a Muslim, didn't know how to give my children proper instruction, what must it be like in other families? Then I read or reread some books written by specialists. In France, where Islam is the country's second most popular religion, there is an old tradition of Orientalism concerning Islamic culture and civilization. I had to extract the essentials and present them simply, clearly, and above all objectively for young readers or adults. There was no question for me of persuading the reader of the accuracy of the Prophet Muhammad's message or to get him to take up this religion. This is not a militant book. It is the book of a father who, talking to his children, would like to talk to all children everywhere. No question for me of writing a work of proselytism or defending Islam because of its misrepresentation and misappropriation by terrorists. On the other hand, what I am seeking to do is to tell the story of Islam as it is recounted in serious books, to present it as something belonging to the universal heritage of humanity. I have told the story of the Prophet Muhammad and the birth of Islam as a tale, a magic story. Next, I had to relate the history of the Arabs, and particularly their spreading influence over the world, at the time when the spirit of curiosity and openness was the essential dynamic of their existence. Indeed, so open were they to other cultures, so widely did they translate the works of other civilizations, that they led the world in science, in intelligence, and in wisdom. And soon they began fighting over political power. They neglected their culture, and their civilization began to decline. What I would say to American readers today is that beyond the knowledge we may have of Islam, beyond this desire to know the other, the foreign, there's the need to keep the doors of one's own culture open. We can enrich ourselves only by exchange, in cultural and economic intermixing, in the dialogue between different peoples. For this, we must not indulge in racism or impose our cultural and religious values on others. It must not be said that Western civilization is superior to other civilizations, nor claimed that the world is experiencing civilization and culture shock. Cultures travel. They move around and get into homes without even being invited. The only dominant culture is that of intelligence, knowledge, and sharing. In this way, culture does not dominate, but opens doors to those seeking to learn and to know what is going on outside their own tribe. This book does not point a finger. It does not teach a moral lesson, but wishes to encourage people to know themselves better. It recalls historical facts, rectifies a few errors, explains a few rituals, defines essential words and concepts, and quashes any excuses for prejudice. The reader will realize, if he or she reads it without distorting glasses, that Islam is a religion like the two other monotheistic religions. It was the last one revealed, that the Prophet Muhammad was the last of the prophets, and that he was the continuator of the other prophets who preceded him. Hence, Muslims should venerate Abraham, Moses, and Jesus just as they venerate Muhammad. The essence of Islam is, in fact, in contrast to the obscurationist discourse of the Taliban, of the militants of Al-Qaeda, their leader Osama bin Laden, and all those barbarians who have used a religion of peace to make war on modernity and the West. Muhammad Ali became the world heavyweight boxing champion through his talent and thanks to his will and determination. It was not Islam that opened the way to his success. On the other hand, Through his faith, he strengthened his identity and achieved the serenity and power necessary for living. For him, Islam is more than submission to peace. It is a happy acceptance of the peace inside, peace with himself. And through these two stories that were so beautifully presented by this wonderful author, I hope it can encourage us to find the peace within ourselves as well. Thank you so much, Abid. Thank you so much, Thunder River Theater. This has been a blessing for all of us to have you care for us. And starting next month, in April, Literature Out Loud will be meeting in the Pitkin County Library live on the third Tuesday of each month at 5:30. So if you're around and not too far away, we'd love to see you. Thank you, my friends. Be safe, be well.